One of the most common refrains I say is we need to drive our designs, like actually get behind the wheel and drive them. We need to experience the design in context and on the road. And that means getting out of Figma or whatever design software we're using and see and feel the design concepts in the vehicle for ourselves.
Hi everyone, thanks for tuning into Nodes of Design. To help support our mission spread knowledge, we have a very special guest in today's episode. Let's welcome Guthrie Dolin, a seasoned design executive and advisor to early stage companies. Guthrie has over 2 decades of experience building cross-functional teams and fostering culture of collaboration and creative excellence. Guthrie had spent his career working with forward-looking companies developing disruptive offerings, including defining work for Tesla, Nest, and Fitbit, as well as innovative initiatives for the likes of Microsoft, Nike, Apple, and Sony. He founded Rise & Co., a design and venture consultancy focused on category-defining startups. Currently, Guthrie is Global Design Director at Ford Model E, leading design DNA across all digital products. Guthrie also lectures at Institute of Design at Stanford, the D.school on branding and design innovation for entrepreneurs. In this episode, Guthrie had shared great insights on automotive UX. We had started the episode by discussing the key considerations that designers should think on when designing for automobiles UX. Later then, we spoke on how has a shift towards electrical and autonomous vehicles impacted automotive UX design. And Guthrie has also shared as a process of designing a new automotive UX experience and how to establish a framework or guiding principles and how to align it with brand's history and vision. Then we spoke on what role does data play in automotive UX design and how can designers incorporate data-driven insights into their designs. We concluded the show on Guthrie's take on automotive UX evolving in next few years and what are the trends or innovations that he is most excited about. Join us every week as we delve into the design world, hearing from visionary leaders who shape our lives and inspire our future. We uncover the stories, inspirations, and insights of design luminaries at the forefront of innovation. Thank you, and until the next time, may your dreams be inspired by brilliance of design. Hi everyone, thanks for tuning into Nodes of Design. In this episode, we have a very special guest with us. Hi Guthrie, welcome to Nodes of Design. It's a pleasure hosting you today on our show.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me on the podcast. Super impressed with what you've accomplished. You created a great body of content and I commend your dedication.
Thank you so much, Guthrie. So if you could give a brief about yourself to our audience out there.
Yeah, sure. Let me start by saying I've been in this design game a long time, since the very early 90s, actually. You might say I'm a bit of a designosaur. Sorry for the dad joke there. Anyway, that said, I'm more excited than ever about design and design driving innovation and the opportunities afforded to us with all these new technologies. I recently joined Ford as Global Director of Design DNA for our Model E division. My team leads the sort of look and feel and voice of tone and includes everything from designers to copywriters, as well as 3D and motion and sound artists. Our purview includes in-vehicle and mobile apps for the full fleet, both BEV and ICE products. There's a lot of acronyms in our industry. BEV is battery electric vehicles or just EV. ICE is internal combustion engine. That's the gas and hybrid powered cars and trucks.
Thank you so much, Guthrie. So what was your journey into design and how did you start? And what are your tips to the beginners on starting the design journey?
Well, growing up, I was really fortunate to have a role model in my dad. He was a graphic designer. And because of him, I witnessed that you could do something that you were really passionate about and earn a living. I distinctly remember going into his home office as a kid and seeing a pad of tracing paper covered with dozens of completely different ampersands. I thought, that's amazing how many choices there were. I think from then on, I knew that I wanted to go into some type of creative job. I ended up going to CCA, that's the California College of Arts, and ultimately settled into graphic design after exploring architecture, industrial design, even dabbling in the fine arts. While at CCA, I got an Apple. I think it was the Mac II. Anyhow, I recall being totally fascinated about how these personal computers might affect the design field. It inspired me to help the school build out its computer lab and even get desktop publishing considered as a part of the curriculum. I had a couple of amazing internships while I was at school, one for the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art And then I landed my first real design job at a local boutique design agency. I was recruited by the principal, Bill Cahan, solely based on a promotional poster I had created for the senior show. At his company, I had the opportunity to work on everything from environmental branding, including like a healthy fast food concept, to corporate annual reports, the old printed kind, which turned out to be a boot camp in design-based storytelling. After a stint in working overseas in Australia, I came back to California where interactive design was exploding, particularly across the web. I spent the next couple of decades, as a principal or founder or executive at design consultancies, primarily focused on brand strategy, identity design, and digital product design. I'd say this combination was pretty unique among my peers. During those years, I had the opportunity to work with established brands like Apple and Nike and Coke, Sony, and so on, as well as some really interesting startups. Some are now big household names and others are really just obscure footnotes. While I was a partner at a company called Automotive, it's basically a digital design firm based in San Francisco, I had the fortune to work with 3 early stage businesses: Nest, the thermostat company, or at the time, Fitbit, the fitness tracker. Both of those are now part of Google, and Tesla Motors, all in relatively quick succession. We started working with Tesla in 2008, prior to the launch of the Model S. First developing their design language, then their first legit website. That was a website that had the build, price, and buy section. And ultimately their retail strategy, which was totally game changing, and the digital in-store experience. That work with Tesla totally ignited my passion for the automotive sector and was like a master class on the industry, not to mention a window into the future that we're kind of living today. I still draw on the learnings all these years later. During that time, I was also working with the founding team for Stanford's design school, or the D.school, most notably with David Kelly. I helped them create the Design Institute's identity, and then I actually taught courses. Through that, I really internalized those sort of design thinking and human-centered principles. After my time at Autopod, I went in-house with a startup called MileIQ, where I led brand and product design. It was quickly snapped up by Microsoft, where I ended up focusing on sort of more consumer-facing apps and productivity tools. Working at Microsoft really helped me understand what it took to design at and for massive scale, not to mention what it took to implement those human-centered practices and champion new ideas with executives at a company of that magnitude. During the recent pandemic years, I went back to consulting with startups through my design and venture studio called Rise & Co. But I was always keen to get back into the automotive space. So last year, I got connected with this guy, Jay Park, by an old colleague and a fantastic design leader. His name is Robert Murdoch. Robert would actually be an amazing guest to have on your podcast. Anyhow, Jay was leading design for Doug Field, who was an ex-Apple and Tesla guy, now the chief executive for Model E at Ford. When the conversation turned to helping establish a design DNA for Model E, I immediately felt like my brand plus product design skill set could be the perfect combination. And thankfully, they agreed. Tips, right. So what are tips for beginners starting their journey? Well, first, I'd say study the masters and master your craft. Become an expert at the tools and break down how your design heroes think and how they work. It's totally okay to emulate while you're learning. Also, I'd say take initiative, meaning don't wait or expect for the opportunities to come to you. Work to manifest those opportunities for yourself. I'll tell you a little story. When I was returning to the US for my stint in Sydney, Australia, I arranged to ship all of my belongings back in a big crate. My clothes, an extensive vinyl collection, and my design portfolio. They were all inside. It's important to note that back in those days, this was the early 90s, most every designer carried a physical portfolio to show their work. You know, those flat black faux leather cases, they were filled with printed samples or photos of your design work. Anyhow, that crate was lost at sea, so the company said, along with it, all of my worldly belongings and what I needed to show potential employers. Anyhow, thankfully, my grandparents helped me buy a new Mac. And while I picked up random work, I also created a series of design challenges for myself. I assigned myself work that I was passionate about. So basically, speculative design jobs that I wish I could get paid for. So during that time, I designed a few album covers for some of my favorite artists. I developed advertising campaigns for Adidas. They were my favorite kicks. I even did an identity for a friend's skateboard company. Anyway, you get the idea. Within a few months, I created a design portfolio that I could actually shop. And frankly, it's kind of better than my school portfolio because it wasn't filled with those sort of rote projects that you get at school. And my heart and my interest was in everything that I had designed. So I also think it's really important for designers to get out into the world and talk to people. I think this comes in the form of informational interviews. So really work your network and try to understand who you can get on the phone with just for learning. Don't put any pressure on that it's about a job. Just get on the phone and see what you can learn about what it takes to get into the industry, what those designers did to get into the industry themselves, and what they look for in designers as they're hiring. I also think it's really great to get involved in your local design community and go to networking events, either online or in person, and get to know people and be curious.
Thank you so much, Guthrie, for all these wonderful tips for us. So let's begin today's our episode on automobile UX. So what are the key considerations that designers must have when designing for automobiles UX?
The quickening shift to EV, the ongoing development of autonomous driving systems or machine learning and AI, we're in a time of really seismic change in the automotive industry. This change is creating new considerations and greater complexity for designers, without a doubt. That's not to mention the landslide of new hardware being packed onto vehicles these days, all of which create new considerations for what and how we design. Regardless of this new technology, the top design consideration always remains safety for drivers as well as their passengers, other motorists on the road, and pedestrians. When designing for safety, specifically safe driving, some big design topics come to mind. First, reducing driver distraction. For example, is the design keeping the driver focused on what's critical in the moment? And when needed, how does the design direct the driver's attention? Is it with image or text or light or sound or some combination of those things? And then another big topic is situational awareness. How can the design employ technology like new camera angles or views to give the driver greater vision of their surroundings, particularly when the conditions make it difficult? And then how might we leverage like a heads-up display or a HUD to aid in navigating while we keep their eyes up and out on the road ahead of them? A lot of times I think about managing cognitive load. Like, does the design use clear hierarchy and scale to make information quickly glanceable? Can the design use progressive display of information to serve up the right information at the right time versus seeing everything all at once, all the time? How can we use white space in smart ways to break up the wall of buttons so people can find things easily? Then, of course, there's human factors and accessibility. These are some of the most critical things, and they're standardized across the industry often. Are the touch targets large enough? Are they easy to tap, swipe, or turn, potentially even without looking? Do the colors, the contrast, the type legibility meet industry standards? Have you considered voice or gesture or sound or light or other things to explore how we communicate? Beyond safety, there are some other important considerations as well. I like to think about creating driver confidence. Like, is the design intuitive and easy to use? How does the design increase the driver's sense of command and control of their vehicle? Potentially, could the design reduce stress while driving when the conditions are bad or they're in unfamiliar territory? These are things that I think about. I'm really interested in how design can aid in promoting happiness and well-being, even deliver moments of joy. I've seen multiple studies on how people with long commutes have lower subjective well-being and less satisfaction in life. So, as our vehicles are able to reduce the need for manual driving and give time back to us, how might we turn that time into something else? Whether the driver wants to use the time for productivity, work or personal, entertainment, personal growth, social connection with friends and family, how might the design of new features and functions fundamentally transform their time sitting in traffic into experiences that are rewarding, even delightful?
Thank you so much, Guthrie. So how has the shift towards electrical and autonomous vehicles impacted the automotive UX design?
Well, both of these topics have a radical impact on design and in very different ways. So let me touch on some key things for both independently. I'll start with electrification. First, let me say that while most people probably think of the shift to battery-powered vehicles as a more recent innovation, the conversation has been going on for over 120 years. From what I read, Henry Ford actually developed a deep friendship with Thomas Edison while working as an engineer at his company. The two men debated the merits of electric versus gas for powering automobiles. They were both obsessed with it. Edison eventually developed an alkaline battery that could power a motor vehicle and built a fully electric car in 1912. However, by that time, Ford had already launched the gas-fueled Model T, which we know was a massive success, and that was kind of that. Over the last couple of decades, financial and environmental concerns have reignited this focus on EVs. And with shifting mindsets and some government policies, the conversion is gaining serious momentum again. So a few things I've been thinking about regarding the current state that design can help address, particularly during these sort of in-between times when public charging networks are nascent and in many communities nearly non-existent. The first is helping people with the daily behavior shift needed with EV. For example, trip planning and managing range for longer drives. Big challenge. When and where to plug in every time you park your vehicle. This is a new decision point. Also, helping people understand battery technology and how to make the most of it. For example, preconditioning your battery in cold weather before driving it extends your range. Or what's the ideal percentage to charge your battery for the greatest efficacy? Even the basics like the types of chargers and plugs, these are all things that new consumers need to understand. So given this, it's important that there are both practical and logistic concerns, as well as existing mindsets and barriers like this range anxiety when people are moving over to electric-powered vehicles. Regarding autonomous driving, in my opinion, design must be at the center of any successful system because of one major factor: managing change of control. That change of control between human and the machine or the vehicle. Designing for this exchange is one of the stickier challenges, and there are levels or modes of autonomy between that fully manual driving and foot, hands, and eyes free. So how does the vehicle signal when and what autonomous features are available to the drivers? And when in those modes, how does the driver know what remains their responsibility versus what's now taken on by the vehicle? And then ultimately, the system needs to gain trust to allow the driver to sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. From my own experience, gaining that trust is going to be a real challenge for many. One thing is clear to me: designers will need to leverage the full toolkit to communicate and aid in these, let's call them co-driving experiences, including the use of visual, sound, light, motion, you name it. But then when more people have fully autonomous modes available, we get to explore designing for the earlier topic that I mentioned, giving them time back, or when drivers become riders. This is where we get to unpack and design for how our vehicles will become a place where life happens in every facet while we're transported from here to there.
Thank you, Guthrie. So can you walk us through the process of designing a new automotive UX experience, and how do you research and establish a framework or guiding principles that aligns with the brand's history and vision?
The process for designing automotive is not so fundamentally different than any other consumer product. Obviously, with my d.school background, I favor human-centered processes and methods. As the stakes are so high, though, safety, complexity, product costs, etc., I'd say there's an extra emphasis on testing and iterating the design concepts, starting early and continuing throughout the process. And by the way, that testing should not only be done with quote users, it should be happening internally with your design team. One of the most common refrains I say is we need to drive our designs, like actually get behind the wheel and drive them. We need to experience the design in context and on the road. And that means getting out of Figma or whatever design software we're using and see and feel the design concepts in the vehicle for ourselves. I mean, like a chef wouldn't serve a dish they never tasted, right? Anyway, early on, this testing is likely happening in simulated environments, such as a full-size model. We call those bucks in the industry, and later in real drivable cars and trucks. I've seen how revealing taking a design in the real world can be. We always learn something unexpected. Driving your designs being said, the process from a high level always starts with research. First, by identifying the audience, got to start there. Understanding their unique needs, the opportunities to address them, looking at the trends, studying the competitive landscape, scouring, all the innovations that are out there. Personally, I always come back to the trifecta of desirability, feasibility, and viability. Your listeners have probably heard this, but I take the time to understand what's desired by people. I think every designer should. And then, of course, what's feasible with the new and emerging technologies, and ultimately what's viable from a business perspective, the white spaces in the market that can be owned by the brand. That's why it's so important to understand what your brand stands for. This foundational research allows us to develop the design objectives and principles, and ultimately concepts around them that are informed by a hypothesis. From there, the sort of design starts, right? We develop mental models and the overall system architecture, considering modes of interaction across all the surfaces, as well as the hardware and software integration. Then we move into the information architecture, including like the taxonomy of how things are organized, and then more detailed screen level wireframes are created. From that point, we can kind of layer on a design language, the visual, voice, sound, motion, whatever. And that development can kind of happen in parallel, but to some extent, we need those wireframes to really bring them to life. Once that language is codified, tested, refined, we can create a design system and essentially a UI kit and guidelines and deliver that documentation and those files to our engineering counterparts. The thing is, these days, everything we deliver is really in perpetual beta. And what I mean by that is that it can constantly change. Just like the software and apps on any smartphone, people expect their software to evolve, offer new features, and keep getting better over time. And this is no different in vehicles. So even after launch, the design process for optimization and evolving it is continual.
Thank you so much, Guthrie. So what role does data play in automotive UX design, and how do you incorporate data-driven insights into your design?
Yeah, it's really important. The data we can collect is actually critically important to the design process. Obviously, the telemetry from every drive is packed with potential learning. So we absolutely need to and should instrument everything and anything that we can. There's also the data we can collect from related and adjacent activities and apps, including apps that are running on the IVI or the in-vehicle infotainment system, but also any associated mobile applications, both from us, like in our case, we have Ford Pass and Lincoln Way, which are companion applications, but also they're applications from third parties. So you can imagine any number of charging applications. From my perspective, though, the biggest opportunities for generating insights of any kind from the quantitative data is to correlate it with qualitative learning, specifically those that we can get from primary user research. Because while the quant is great at telling us the who, the what, the where, and the when, we need to understand the why or why not people actually do what they do when they're in vehicles. From my experience, that's how the richest and most actionable insights are surfaced.
How do you see automotive UX evolving in next few years, and what trends or innovations are you most excited about?
Yeah, we've covered quite a few already, but overall, there are some fundamental innovations that are possibly entirely revolutionary shifts that are really exciting to me. First, I want to talk about this notion of fully networked vehicles. We call them FNV. Those are vehicles that can enable the rapid deployment of over-the-air or OTA software updates, as well as new services. They can deliver those new services as well as process and send deep vehicle data to drive the continual improvement of our products. This idea of fully networked vehicles unlocks the notion of vehicle as a platform, or like this platform app model, you might say. Just like in iOS or Android, they did it for phones. We're building a platform for an infinite number of applications and experiences to be conceived and created by the automotive manufacturers. And arguably, more importantly, a broader community of enterprising outsiders, and those people that are only limited by their imagination and ingenuity. We saw that in the smartphone space, and I guarantee that we're going to see it in the vehicle space as well. A couple of the really big things. The topic du jour, which is machine learning and AI. I'm very interested to see how these ever-evolving and generative technologies will aid in the ongoing personalization of our vehicle experiences. and interfaces. I can easily imagine a future state in which, based on my own preferences, my own aesthetics, my proclivities as a driver, my dashboard and in-vehicle controls look and function completely different than anyone else's. And then I think finally, hardware technology, specifically lower cost, smaller, lighter weight, often higher quality technology. It could be cameras or displays or power sources or any number of sensors or actuators. These advancements are going to continue to unlock new possibilities for design experiences in our vehicles.
Thank you so much, Guthrie, for sharing all these wonderful insights with us. So could you please share with us, how does your day look like? Any interesting stories?
Yeah, absolutely. As a design leader, I've got a broad charter, so my day-to-day activities are incredibly varied. However, my weeks and months sort of have a shape or a cadence. Typically, my work week looks like this. Mondays are really all about alignment and setting or adjusting priorities for the work to be done that week, both for myself and for my team. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, it's all about deep work and collaborative work. So wherever and whenever possible, I go into the office with other folks and we get on site and we have work sessions, we have brainstorms. We use whiteboards and Post-its. It's great. Wednesdays and Fridays, I typically use for one-on-ones, design reviews, general check-ins with folks. These are also days that I typically will meet with other folks in different departments or leaders across the company, from engineering to project managers or creatives in other groups like brand marketing or the vehicle design studio. I usually go to Dearborn monthly for meetings and product design reviews. I have to say it's one of the most thrilling things I get to do because I get to see and sit in full-size vehicle models. It's like being in a time machine to the future. Actually, a funny story. About 2 weeks ago, I was in Dearborn and I got lost walking between meetings, sort of in the basement labyrinth of an old building. There's a lot of those in Detroit. Anyhow, I found myself stumbling into the Mustang design studio and staring at a bunch of future concepts. I sort of felt like I was going to get in trouble being in there, but I was totally infatuated. It was like tasting forbidden fruit. It was so cool.
Thank you so much, Guthrie, for all these wonderful insights. And so we'll conclude the show by your 3 favorite book recommendations and also people who inspire you the most in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. When I first joined Ford, I actually picked up a beautiful coffee table book on Jay's recommendation. It's simply called Cars. Well, there's actually a really long subtitle. Hold on a second, let me read it. Freedom, style, sex, power, motion, color, everything. Anyway, the book is really cool. It's basically a story of how this object of industry became a medium of artistic and self-expression. And it sort of takes the reader through a series of case studies from the Model T to the more contemporary classics. It's great inspiration. And for someone like me, fantastic because it's filled with lots of beautiful photography. There's another oldie but goodie that I really like. It's called The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. It's really a great primer for designing products that are intended for everyday use. It's like a real HCD or human-centered design touchstone. And it includes insights on how people process information, leveraging cognitive science to develop your design principles, as well as framing and solving the right problems. Currently, I'm reading an amazing book called The Creative Act, A Way of Being. It was written by legendary hip-hop producer Rick Rubin. It's all about where creativity comes from and how to tap into it. It's the perfect intersection of creativity and spirituality, which is so perfect for me. So far, I'm really enjoying it. As for inspirational people, well, I mentioned my dad. He's been an incredible mentor for sure, in so many ways. But I'd also say David Kelly, the IDEO and d.school founder. He's been a real mentor for human-centered design for me, also design thinking. Almost more importantly, he taught me the power of optimism for solving really difficult challenges. And I can't thank him enough for that. Probably a lot of people's inspiration, Steve Jobs. For me, I witnessed him as an unrelenting advocate for quality and craft down to the smallest detail. I mean, he obsessed about it. But what I really appreciated was that he was a long-term thinking regarding how design really returned on its investment for his business. And so when people think of Apple, they think of great design, and they're willing to pay for it, and they're willing to obsess about it, just like he obsessed about it. Another real inspiration for me, which is sort of a little bit out of left field, but I'd love to end with it, is RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan, the hip hop group. I've been so obsessed with the Wu-Tang logo. It's like this incredible case study on how to build a mass market identity while maintaining total authenticity and unquestionable street credibility. You got to respect that. And that's why I respect him so much. I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Guthrie, for sharing all these wonderful recommendations with us. We are looking forward to host you again in our upcoming episodes. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.